My name is Braden. I'm 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my own brother looked me in the eye and told me I was too soft to survive in this family. Before I tell you how I ended up owning the very roof he tried to kick me from under, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. It was raining, not just a drizzle, but that cold, biting Connecticut rain that soaks through your jacket in seconds and chills you to the bone. I stood on the asphalt of the driveway, water dripping off the end of my nose, staring up at the house I had lived in for the last 2 years. The house where I had grown up. The house where I had just spent 24 months changing diapers, spoon-feeding soup, and reading bedtime stories to my dying mother. And now it was the house I was being evicted from. A cardboard box hit the wet pavement next to my feet with a sickening thud. The bottom was already soggy, and I watched, paralyzed, as it split open. My teaching supplies spilled out onto the dirty driveway. A stack of colorful construction paper, now ruined. A jar of safety scissors. And right on top, a stuffed bear with a missing eye that I used to calm down the kids in my kindergarten class when they had panic attacks. Oops, a voice said from the garage door. Slippery hands. I looked up. Marcus stood there. My older brother. The golden child. He was wearing a navy blue suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary as a teacher. He wasn't wet. He was standing just inside the shelter of the garage, leaning against the doorframe, checking his watch. You have 5 minutes to get the rest of your junk off the property, Braden, he said. His voice was flat, bored, like he was ordering coffee. The landscapers are coming at noon, and I don't want your trash cluttering up the driveway. I unclenched my jaw, trying to keep my voice steady. Marcus, it's been 3 days since the funeral. 3 days. Mom isn't even cold in the ground yet. You can't just kick me out. Can't I? He laughed, a short, sharp sound. He stepped out, just enough so the rain hit the toes of his Italian leather shoes. Dad made it clear, didn't he? Sons inherit. That's the rule. Always has been. I'm the eldest. I'm the one who knows how to manage assets. This house is an asset, Braden. You're a liability. I knelt down, trying to salvage my books. The water was ruining the pages of The Giving Tree. It was Mom's favorite. I live here, Marcus. I have rights. You lived here, he corrected me. You were here to play nurse. A glorified babysitter for Mom because you didn't have a real career to get back to. But the job's done. Mom's gone. Dad's gone. And the house is mine. He walked over to me. He towered over me while I was on my knees gathering my things. It was a power move he had perfected when we were teenagers. Look at you, he sneered, kicking the stuffed bear into a puddle. Playing with dolls in the rain. Dad was right. You're not cut out for this world. Real men build empires, Braden. They don't sing nursery rhymes to snot-nosed brats for minimum wage. I grabbed the bear. Mud smeared across its face. I wanted to hit him. For the first time in my life, I wanted to smash that smug look off his face. But I didn't, because that's not who I am. And Marcus knew it. He counted on it. Go on. He shooed me away with his hand. Go sing your nursery rhymes at the shelter. Maybe they'll give you a cot. Just then, a sleek black Porsche Panamera pulled into the driveway, splashing muddy water all over my pants. The window rolled down. Victoria, my sister-in-law, peered out over her designer sunglasses. Marcus, honey, she called out, completely ignoring me. The contractor is on the phone. He wants to know if we're keeping the lavender garden or paving it for the pool. My heart stopped. You're paving the garden? I asked, my voice cracking. Mom planted that garden 30 years ago. It was her sanctuary. Victoria finally looked at me. Her expression was one of mild disgust, like she had stepped in something unpleasant. Oh, Braden, you're still here? It's just weeds, sweetie. We need a heated pool if we're gonna flip this place in the spring. Curb appeal. You wouldn't understand. Flip it. I stood up, clutching the muddy bear. You're selling the house? Asset management, Marcus said, turning his back on me to walk toward the car. Dad left me the empire. I'm expanding it. Now get off my property before I call the cops for trespassing. He got into the Porsche. The engine revved, a deep, aggressive growl that shook the air. As they drove into the garage and the automatic door began to descend, shutting me out of the only home I had ever known, I felt a kind of cold that the rain couldn't touch. I was homeless. I was broke. And the people who were supposed to be my family looked at me like I was garbage. I dragged my soggy boxes to my old 2010 Honda Civic parked on the street. Took 3 trips. I was shivering uncontrollably by the time I threw the last box into the back seat. As I slammed the trunk, something fell out of one of the teaching books I had rescued. It was a cream-colored envelope. It must have been tucked inside the pages of the Velveteen Rabbit. I picked it up. The paper was dry, protected by the book cover. On the front, in shaky, cursive handwriting, was my name, Braden. I knew that handwriting. It was Mom's. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, the heater blasting but doing nothing to warm me up. I tore open the envelope. There was no date, just a short note. My darling Braden, if you are reading this, then the storm has come. I know your father, and I know your brother. They see the world in straight lines and dollar signs. They don't see the curves, the soft places where life actually happens. Do not let them break you. Do not let Marcus make you feel small. You have a heart that is bigger than this entire house. Go to Evelyn Cole, the lawyer. Don't sign anything Marcus gives you. Trust me. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. The rain hammered against the roof of the car. Trust me. Mom had been gone for 3 weeks. Dad had died in the crash instantly, but Mom had lingered in the hospital for 2 hours. I wasn't there when it happened. I was teaching. Marcus was in a meeting. We were both orphans now, but sitting there in my beat-up car, watching the lights go on in the house that Marcus had just claimed, I realized I had been an orphan long before they died. I put the car in gear. I didn't know what Evelyn Cole could do. Marcus had Dad's will. Marcus had the power. But Mom had left me a map, and I was going to follow it. To understand why my brother hates me, you have to understand the man who raised us. Robert Mercer didn't just have a family. He had a hierarchy. My father was a self-made man in the construction business. He believed that the world was divided into 2 types of people, the hammer and the nail. You were either pounding the world into the shape you wanted, or you were getting buried. Marcus was the hammer. I was the nail. I remember being 7 years old. It was a Saturday. Dad took Marcus and me to one of his job sites. It was a massive skeletal structure of steel and concrete, the beginning of a shopping mall. It was loud, dusty, and dangerous. Marcus, who was 13 then, loved it. He put on the hard hat Dad gave him and strutted around, mimicking Dad's walk, yelling at imaginary workers. Dad beamed. He put a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder and pointed to the skyline. See that, son? That's legacy. Concrete. Steel. Stuff that lasts. Men build things that you can touch. I was sitting on a pile of lumber, reading a book about frogs. I didn't care about concrete. I cared about why the sky was blue and how caterpillars turned into butterflies. Dad walked over to me and snatched the book out of my hands. Braden, he barked. Get up. Stop burying your nose in that fairy tale garbage. Go help your brother stack those bricks. I don't want to, I said quietly. I want to be a teacher when I grow up. Dad laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a bark. He looked at the foreman standing nearby and rolled his eyes. A teacher. Great. I'm raising a babysitter. He looked down at me with cold, disappointed eyes. Teachers don't drive Mercedes, Braden. Teachers work for the men who drive Mercedes. Remember that. That was the dynamic for the next 20 years. When Marcus got into business school, Dad threw a party that cost more than my college tuition. He bought Marcus a starter condo. He introduced him to investors. He groomed him. When I got my degree in early childhood education, Dad didn't even come to the ceremony. He told Mom he had a zoning hearing he couldn't miss. When I got my first job at the local elementary school, earning a humble salary, Dad stopped asking me how work was. In his mind, I didn't have a job. I had a hobby. Soft. He used to say at dinner, stabbing his steak. The boy is too soft. The world is going to eat him alive. But Mom was different. Linda Mercer was the quiet in the storm. She was a woman who had learned to survive by making herself small, by moving silently around Dad's ego. But in the garden or in the kitchen, she came alive. She loved that I was a teacher. She loved that I could calm a crying child in seconds. Your father builds houses, she told me once, while we were pruning the lavender. But you build people, Braden. That's harder. Concrete sets in a day. A human heart takes a lifetime to form. 2 years ago, when Mom got the diagnosis, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, the hierarchy in the house shifted, but not in the way Dad expected. Dad couldn't handle sickness. To him, illness was a weakness, a flaw in the design. He retreated into his work. He stayed at the office late. He couldn't look Mom in the eye because her frailty reminded him that he couldn't fix everything with a hammer. Marcus was worse. He treated Mom's cancer like a bad investment. He visited exactly 3 times in 2 years. I counted. He would breeze in, wearing his cologne that smelled like money and cedar, stand at the foot of the bed, and check his phone. You look resting, he'd say awkwardly. Then he'd turn to me. Make sure she's taking her meds, Braden. I gotta run. Closing a deal in Hartford. He never held her hand. He never wiped her brow. He never sat in the dark and listened to her fears about dying. I did. I moved back home. I took a leave of absence from the school, then switched to substitute teaching just to keep some money coming in. I became the nurse, the cook, the cleaner, and the confessor. There were nights when the pain was so bad Mom would scream. Dad would sleep in the guest room with earplugs. I would be up, adjusting her pillows, crushing ice for her dry lips, reading to her. I read her everything. Winnie the Pooh, the Velveteen Rabbit, the Little Prince. One night, about 6 months before the end, Mom was having a lucid moment. The morphine had taken the edge off the pain, and she was looking out the window at the moonlight on the lavender bushes. He hates you because you're strong, she whispered. I looked up from my book. Who? Dad. And Marcus, she said. Her voice was thin like paper. They think strength is noise. They think it's yelling and taking and building high walls. They don't know that real strength is staying when everyone else leaves. Real strength is wiping a bottom with dignity. Real strength is gentle. She reached out and squeezed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly firm. I have a secret, Braden, she said. A secret garden. I thought she was delirious. I know, Mom. The lavender is beautiful. No. She shook her head, a small, mischievous smile playing on her lips, the first smile I'd seen in weeks. Not that garden. A bigger one. I've been planting it for years. Just for you. I didn't press her. I thought it was the medication talking. I smoothed her hair and went back to reading Charlotte's Web. Then came the accident. Mom had rallied. It was a miracle, the doctors said. Remission. She felt well enough to go for a drive. Dad, in a rare moment of guilt or perhaps just wanting to show off his new car, offered to drive her to the coast. A truck driver fell asleep on I-95, crossed the median. I was in my classroom, helping a 5-year-old named Leo glue macaroni to a paper plate, when the principal walked in. Her face was pale. I knew. Before she even spoke, I knew. The funeral was a blur of black suits and empty platitudes. Marcus stood at the podium and gave a eulogy that sounded like a resume. He talked about Dad's business acumen, Dad's vision, Dad's legacy. He mentioned Mom twice. He called her a supportive wife. I sat in the front row, staring at the 2 caskets, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. Dad had never respected me. Mom was the only one who saw me, and now I was alone with Marcus. After the service, people came back to the house I was about to be kicked out of. Marcus was in the corner, holding a scotch, laughing with one of Dad's business rivals. I walked over to him. Marcus, we should thank people for coming. He looked at me, his eyes glassy with alcohol and arrogance. Relax, Braden. I'm networking. Dad would want me to secure the connections. You go. I don't know, wash some dishes or something. Make yourself useful. That was the moment. The moment I realized that grief hadn't changed him. It had just removed the only person, Mom, who had forced him to pretend to be human. And now, sitting in my car with the letter, I realized Mom knew. She knew exactly what would happen when she was gone. She hadn't just been planting flowers. She had been planting a defense. I spent that first night on Diane's couch. Diane was the head nurse at the hospice center where we had taken Mom for pain management consultations. We had bonded over the long hours. She was 60, tough as nails, and had a soft spot for strays. "Eat," she commanded, placing a bowl of stew in front of me. "You look like a ghost." "I feel like one," I admitted. "Marcus changed the locks, Diane. He threw my teaching materials in the mud." "He's a fool," Diane said, sitting opposite me with a mug of tea. "He sees a teacher and thinks weak. I see a teacher and I think patience of a saint and the bladder of a camel. You're tougher than him, Braden." I stayed with Diane for 3 days. I went to work every morning, wearing the same 2 shirts I had managed to save, washing them in Diane's sink at night. It's a strange thing, teaching kindergarten when your life is falling apart. You walk into that classroom and you have to leave your grief at the door. 5-year-olds don't care about inheritance laws or probate courts. They care that their juice box is stuck or that Sammy stole their blue crayon. But that Tuesday I was struggling. We were doing circle time and I was reading a book about families. A little girl, Maya, raised her hand. "Mr. Mercer, where is your mommy?" The room went silent. Kids have a way of asking the questions adults are too polite to touch. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "My mommy is in heaven, Maya. Is she watching you?" "I hope so." "Then you have to be happy," she said matter-of-factly. "Mommies get sad when you're sad." It took everything I had not to break down right there on the alphabet rug. That afternoon, during nap time, my phone buzzed. It was Marcus. I stared at the screen. I hadn't spoken to him since the driveway incident. I almost let it go to voicemail, but I needed to know what was happening with the funeral costs with the house. Everything. "Hello, Braden." Marcus's voice was too loud, too cheerful. "How's the camping trip going?" "I'm staying with a friend, Marcus. Not that you care." "Look, no need to be dramatic. I'm calling with an olive branch. I've been thinking about you. I know a teacher's salary is, well, let's call it quaint. And I know you're probably stressed about finding a studio apartment that accepts whatever that is you drive." My grip on the phone tightened. "Get to the point. I want to help you out, little brother. I'm prepared to offer you $10,000. Cash. To get you set up. $10,000. To Marcus, that was a weekend trip to Vegas. To me, it was 4 months of pay. It was tempting. For a split second, I thought about the security deposit I needed. I thought about the student loans I was still paying off. "That's generous," I said cautiously. "Why?" "Just family looking out for family," he said smoothly. "There's just a small catch. A formality, really. I have a document I need you to sign. It basically says you waive any contest to Dad's estate. You acknowledge that the house, the business, the accounts, everything Dad built goes to me as per his wishes. You take the 10 grand, you walk away, we avoid lawyers. Clean break." The air in the classroom felt suddenly very thin. "You want me to sign away my rights for 10 grand? Braden, be realistic." Marcus's tone hardened. "You're not going to get anything in probate. Dad's will is ironclad. Sons inherit. I'm doing you a favor. If you fight me, you'll spend that 10 grand on a lawyer in an hour and end up with 0. I'm offering you a lifeline. Don't be stupid." I looked around my classroom. I saw the drawings on the wall, crooked houses with giant suns. I saw the cubbies with the kids' names. I saw the world I was building. It wasn't an empire of concrete. It was a world of care. And I remembered Mom's letter. "Do not let Marcus make you feel small." "No," I said. Silence on the other end. Then, a cold, low laugh. "Excuse me?" I said, "No, Marcus. I'm not signing anything. And I don't want your money." "You idiot," he hissed. "You sanctimonious little idiot. You think you can fight me? I have Dad's lawyers. I have the resources. I will bury you in paperwork until you're begging for that 10 grand. You're gonna walk into that will reading on Thursday and walk out with nothing. Absolutely nothing. Hope you enjoy the homeless shelter, teacher." He hung up. I sat there, my hands shaking. I had just turned down $10,000. I had just declared war on a man who had never lost a battle in his life. I called Evelyn Cole's office immediately. "This is Braden Mercer," I told the receptionist. "My mother told me to call." "Ah, Mr. Mercer." The receptionist's voice changed instantly. It became warm, professional, and oddly respectful. "We've been expecting you. Mrs. Cole has cleared her schedule for the reading on Thursday. She said to tell you, bring popcorn." "Popcorn? I don't understand," I said. "You don't need to yet, honey," the receptionist said. "Just show up and wear your best suit, even if it's your only suit." I hung up, feeling a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't fear anymore. It was curiosity. What had Mom done? What kind of secret garden could possibly stand up against Robert Mercer's empire? Thursday came. I put on my charcoal gray suit. It was a bit shiny at the elbows, and the style was 5 years out of date, but I pressed a crisp white shirt and polished my scuffed shoes until they gleamed. I drove to the law offices of Harrison and Cole in downtown Hartford. It was a brownstone building, oozing old money and quiet power. In the parking lot, I saw it. The black Porsche. Marcus was already there. I took a deep breath. I channeled the patience I used when 35-year-olds were screaming for a snack. I am the calm in the chaos, I told myself. I am Mom's son. I walked up the granite steps and pushed open the heavy oak doors. I was walking into the lion's den, armed with nothing but a nursery rhyme and a dead woman's promise. The conference room smelled of lemon polish and intimidation. It was dominated by a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on. The walls were lined with leather-bound books that looked like they hadn't been opened since the Civil War. Marcus was sitting at the head of the table naturally. He looked like he owned the building. He was typing on his phone, not even looking up when I entered. Victoria was next to him, flipping through a Vogue magazine, looking bored. "You're late," Marcus said, without checking his watch. "I'm on time, Marcus. It's 2 p.m. exactly. If you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. Dad taught us that." "Oh wait, he taught me that." He finally looked up, smirking. "Nice suit. Goodwill having a sale." I took a seat at the opposite end of the table. "It's the suit I wore to bury our parents, Marcus." That shut him up for a second. But only a second. "Look, let's get this over with," he said, drumming his fingers on the table. "I have a meeting with the architects at 4. We're finalizing the plans for the pool." He looked at me pointedly. "The excavators are coming Monday to dig up those weeds." He meant the lavender. He was enjoying this. Just then, the side door opened. Evelyn Cole walked in. I had expected a stiff, older man. Evelyn was a woman in her 60s with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She wore a tweed blazer and carried an air of authority that made Marcus sit up straighter. But she wasn't alone. Walking in behind her, leaning on a cane but moving with determination, was Grandma Eleanor. My jaw dropped. Grandma! Eleanor Whitfield was Mom's mother. She was 82, sharp-tongued, and notoriously private. She lived in a retirement community in Florida. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. "Hello, Braden," she said, winking at me. She walked past Marcus, who had stood up, looking confused. "Grandma, what are you doing here?" Marcus asked. "This is a legal proceeding. It's private." "I was invited," she said, pulling out the chair next to me. "Sit down, Marcus. You look like a flamingo trying to take flight." Marcus flushed pink. "Invited by who?" "By the executor," Evelyn Cole said, placing a stack of files on the table. She sat down in the center, creating a triangle between us. "Mrs. Whitfield is here as a witness and an interested party." "Interested party?" Marcus scoffed. "Mom didn't have any assets to leave. Everything came from Dad. This is a waste of time." "We shall see," Evelyn said coolly. She opened the first folder. We will begin with the last will and testament of Robert Mercer. Marcus leaned back, crossing his arms. Go ahead. Read the part where I get the kingdom. Evelyn put on her glasses. She read through the legalese. It was exactly what Marcus had said. To my eldest son, Marcus Robert Mercer, who has shown the aptitude and strength to carry on the Mercer name, I leave 100% of my business interests, my stock portfolio, my vehicles, and my personal savings. Marcus grinned, shooting a told-you-so look at me. To my younger son, Braden, Evelyn continued, her voice devoid of emotion, I leave the sum of $24,000, representing the tuition cost of 1 year of his teaching degree, which I consider a poor investment. I hope this sum helps him find a more suitable path. It was a slap in the face from the grave. $24,000. It wasn't about the money. It was the comment. Poor investment. 24 grand. Marcus chuckled. Well, it's better than the 10 I offered, Braden. You should be grateful. You can buy a lot of crayons with that. Is that all? I asked, my voice steady, though my hands were clenched under the table. For Robert's estate, yes, Evelyn said. She closed the folder. Great. Marcus stood up. So the house is mine. The business is mine. Braden gets his pity money. Are we done? I really do have to go. Sit down, Mr. Mercer, Evelyn said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had a steel core that made Marcus pause. We are not done. We have not read the last will and testament of Linda Mercer. Marcus laughed, rolling his eyes. Mom? Mom didn't have a will. She didn't have anything to will. She was a housewife. Dad paid for everything. Even that garden she loved so much was on Dad's land. Actually, Evelyn said, opening the second, much thicker folder. That is factually incorrect. She pulled out a USB drive and placed it on the table. Mrs. Mercer anticipated that her competency and her ownership might be challenged, Evelyn said, looking directly at Marcus. So, she recorded a video statement to accompany her will, and she retained me to execute a specific series of trusts she established 8 years ago. 8 years ago? Victoria spoke for the first time. What are you talking about? Play the video, Grandma Eleanor said softly. She reached over and patted my hand. Her skin was paper-thin and cold, but her grip was strong. Evelyn plugged the drive into a laptop and turned the screen so we could all see. The video player opened, and there was Mom. She was sitting in her favorite armchair in the sunroom. She was wearing a yellow cardigan and a silk scarf over her head. She had lost her hair from the chemo by then. She looked frail, but her eyes were blazing. Hello, my loves. Mom's voice filled the room. My heart broke all over again. Felt like she was in the room with us. If you are watching this, I am gone. And I know exactly what is happening in that room right now. On the screen, Mom leaned forward. Marcus, you are sitting at the head of the table. You are checking your watch. You are thinking this is a waste of time because you believe Dad owns the world. Marcus stiffened. He stopped checking his watch. And Braden, Mom's eyes softened on the screen. My sweet boy, you are sitting there quietly, probably wearing that gray suit you hate, feeling like you don't belong. You are feeling like you failed me. I wiped a tear from my cheek. You didn't fail me, Mom said firmly. You saved me, every day. And now it's my turn to save you. She took a deep breath on the video. Robert always said that real men build empires. He taught you that, Marcus. But he forgot one thing. Empires are built on land. And you have to own the land to rule the empire. Mom smiled. It was a dangerous smile. Evelyn, please read the deed to the house. The video paused. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioner. Marcus looked at Evelyn. What deed? Evelyn pulled a document from the folder. It was old, yellowed at the edges. This, Evelyn announced, is the quitclaim deed for the property at 127 Maple Drive, dated 5 years ago. 5 years ago? Marcus frowned. Why? Your father was being sued, Evelyn explained. A worker was injured on one of his sites. To protect the family home from being seized in a lawsuit, Robert transferred the title solely into Linda's name. It was a strategic move to hide assets. Marcus went pale. I remember that. The lawsuit went away. He transferred it back. He intended to, Evelyn said. But Robert was a busy man, and arrogant. He assumed that since Linda was his wife, it didn't matter whose name was on the paper. He forgot about it. He never filed the paperwork to transfer it back. She slid the paper across the table. At the time of her death, the house belonged 100% to Linda Mercer, not Robert. Therefore, it was not Robert's to give to you, Marcus. Marcus grabbed the paper. His hands were shaking. This is a technicality. Mom would have left it to me anyway. I'm the eldest. I'm the one who can maintain it. Let's see, Evelyn said. She turned back to the laptop. Resume video. On the screen, Mom adjusted her scarf. Robert made a mistake, Mom said. He underestimated the paperwork. Just like he underestimated you, Braden. Marcus, she continued, her voice hardening. You have spent your life believing you are entitled to everything because you were born first and born loud. You mocked your brother for being a teacher. You called him a babysitter. You told him he was weak. But I watched, Mom said. I watched Braden come home every day after teaching 20 children and still have the energy to cook me dinner. I watched him clean my vomit without flinching. I watched him give up his salary, his social life, and his sleep to care for me. You visited 3 times, Marcus, and every time you asked about the will. In the conference room, Victoria shifted uncomfortably. Marcus was staring at the screen, his mouth slightly open. So, Mom said, here is my decision. The house at 127 Maple Drive is left to my son, Braden Mercer. No! Marcus slammed his hand on the table. That's insane. He can't afford the taxes. He's a kindergarten teacher. He'll run it into the ground. Sit down, Marcus. Grandma Eleanor barked. It was the loudest I'd ever heard her speak. On the screen, Mom held up a hand, as if silencing him herself. I know what you're saying, Marcus, Video Mom said. You're saying Braden can't afford it. You're saying he doesn't have the capital. That brings me to the second matter. The trust. The trust, Marcus whispered. 8 years ago, Mom said. My mother, Eleanor, sold her land in Florida. She wanted to give me the money, but I knew if I put it in the joint account, Robert would spend it on a new crane or a new car. So I opened a separate account, an irrevocable trust. Evelyn paused the video again. She picked up a thick document bound in blue paper. The Linda Mercer Educational Trust, Evelyn read. Funded initially with $400,000 from Eleanor Whitfield. Invested aggressively in tech stocks over the last 8 years. My head was spinning. Mom had money. Mom had investments. She clipped coupons for groceries. She wore the same winter coat for 10 years. What is the value of the trust? Victoria asked, her voice trembling. I could see the greed fighting with the fear in her eyes. Evelyn looked at the last page of the statement. As of the market close yesterday, Evelyn said clearly, the trust is valued at $1,245,000. $1.2 million. I gasped. I actually forgot to breathe. That was impossible. And, Evelyn continued, the terms of the trust are specific. The beneficiary must be a guardian of the future. Someone who has dedicated their life to the care and education of others. She looked at Marcus. That excludes real estate developers. She looked at me. The sole beneficiary is Braden Mercer. This is fraud. Marcus screamed, standing up so fast his chair tipped over. Dad didn't know about this. You went behind his back. This is marital property. It is not, Evelyn said calmly. Inheritance and gifts from family, kept separate, are not marital property. It was Linda's money. She protected it. From Robert. And from you. I'm contesting this, Marcus spat, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. I'll sue. I'll tie this up in court for years. Braden won't see a dime. I have lawyers who eat people like you for breakfast. You could try, Evelyn said. But there is a no contest clause. And there is one final asset. What? Marcus snapped. What else could she possibly have hidden? Life insurance, Evelyn said. Robert had a policy. But Linda had one too. A private policy she paid for out of the dividend checks from the trust. For 12 years. Value? Marcus demanded. $500,000, Evelyn said. Beneficiary? Braden Mercer. She picked up a calculator and tapped a few keys. So, let's recap, Evelyn said, looking up with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. From Robert's estate, Braden receives $24,000. From Linda's estate, he receives the house, valued at $650,000. The trust, valued at $1.2 million. And the insurance, $500,000. She looked at me. Mr. Mercer, your total inheritance today is approximately $2,374,000. $2.3 million. I sat there, frozen. I was a teacher who worried about the price of gas. I was a man who had been kicked out of his home 3 days ago. And now? And Marcus? Victoria asked, her voice barely a whisper. What does Marcus get from Linda? Evelyn looked at the will. To my son Marcus, she read. I leave my collection of porcelain figurines, and the hope that he learns that money does not make a man. The room went silent. The contrast was brutal. $2 million versus a box of ceramic dolls. Marcus stood there, swaying. He looked at me. He looked at the paperwork. He looked at Victoria. $2 million, he muttered. The house? His face lost all color. He grabbed his chest. Marcus. Victoria stood up. It's not. I can't. Marcus wheezed. And then the golden child, the builder of empires, the man who was too strong to fail, rolled his eyes back in his head. His knees buckled. He hit the carpet with a heavy, dead thud. Call 911, Evelyn shouted to her assistant. I sat there, glued to my chair. I watched my brother lying on the floor, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. Mom had done it. She hadn't just left me money. She had left me a shield. She had built an empire of her own. An empire of patience, compound interest, and protective love. And she had dropped it right on top of Marcus's head. The next 20 minutes were chaotic. Paramedics arrived. They checked Marcus's vitals. It wasn't a heart attack. It was a vasovagal syncope, a faint, induced by extreme shock and stress. They sat him up, gave him some water. He was pale, sweating, his expensive suit rumpled. When the paramedics left, the room was quiet again. But the energy had shifted. Marcus wasn't the lion anymore. He was the prey. We need to go, Marcus said weakly, trying to stand up. Victoria, help me up. We're calling our lawyers in the morning. Victoria didn't move. She was staring at the summary sheet of assets Evelyn had left on the table. Victoria, Marcus snapped. I said let's go. We can't sue, Victoria said. Her voice was flat. Of course we can. It's undue influence. Mom was sick. We can't afford to sue Marcus. Victoria screamed. The sound tore through the room. Victoria, the Ice Queen, was melting down. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. What do you mean? I asked. Victoria turned to me, her eyes wild. We're broke, Braden. We're worse than broke. Shut up, Victoria, Marcus hissed. No, she yelled at him. He needs to know. We need him to know because we need his help. She turned back to me. The empire? It's leveraged to the hilt. Marcus bet everything on a commercial development in downtown Bridgeport. The zoning failed. The investors pulled out. We owe the bank $400,000 by the end of the month or they take everything. I looked at Marcus. He was staring at the floor. The Porsche? I asked. Leased? Victoria sobbed. And 3 months behind on payments. They sent a repossession notice yesterday. That's why he needed the house. We were going to sell it to pay the bridge loan. Without the house, we go to jail, Braden. This fraud. He moved money from escrow accounts. The silence that followed was heavy. So that was it. The insults, the eviction, the rush to pave the garden. It wasn't just greed. It was desperation. Marcus wasn't a tycoon. He was a drowning man trying to stand on my shoulders to breathe. Marcus looked up at me. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic, naked fear. "Braden," he said. His voice cracked. "You heard her. It's bad. I messed up." He reached out a hand across the table. "You're my brother," he pleaded. "We're family. Mom wouldn't want me to go to prison. She wouldn't want Victoria to be homeless." I looked at his hand. The same hand that had pointed to the street 3 days ago. The same hand that had thrown my teddy bear into the mud. "You have $2 million now," Marcus said, gaining a little confidence. "You can pay off the debt. You can save us. It's just money to you. You're a teacher, you don't need much. Please. For Dad. For Dad." I repeated. I stood up. I felt Grandma Eleanor stand up beside me. "Marcus," I said quietly, "Dad told you that real men build empires. He was wrong. Real men take responsibility for their own mistakes." "Braden, come on," he whined. "Don't be like this." I was stressed. I didn't mean what I said in the driveway. "Yes, you did," I said. "You meant every word. You kicked me out in the rain. You mocked my profession. You tried to erase Mom's garden." I picked up the folder containing the deed to my house. "I teach kindergarten, Marcus," I said. "And the first rule in my classroom is, you don't hit people and then ask for a cookie." "I'm not asking for a cookie. I'm asking for my life." "No," I said firmly. "You're asking for a bailout. And the answer is no. You can't do this," Victoria shrieked. "We're family. Family treats family with respect," I said. "You treated me like an employee you could fire. Well, I quit." I turned to Evelyn. "Mrs. Cole, thank you. I'm ready to sign the papers to transfer the funds." "Excellent," Evelyn smiled. I walked toward the door. Marcus scrambled to block my path. "Braden, wait. What are you going to do? You're going to let your brother go to jail over money?" I looked him in the eye. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just felt free. "I'm going to go home," I said. "I'm going to replant the lavender you stepped on. And then, I'm going to build something real." I walked out of the conference room. I heard Victoria sobbing. I heard Marcus cursing. But for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they were doing. I had a nursery rhyme to sing, and it sounded a lot like victory. It has been 6 months since I walked out of that conference room, leaving my brother and his crumbling facade behind me. People often ask me if money changed me. They ask if I went out and bought a sports car to park in the driveway where Marcus used to mock me, or if I went on a lavish vacation to Europe to sip champagne and forget the past. I didn't do any of that. The first thing I did was pay off my student loans. I remember logging into the portal, staring at that balance that had hung over my head like a dark cloud for a decade, and clicking Pay in Full. When the balance turned to 0, I sat in my kitchen, Mom's kitchen, and cried. It wasn't a cry of sadness. It was the release of a weight I hadn't realized was crushing my lungs. Then I went to work on the garden. Marcus had wanted to pave it over for a heated pool, a vanity project for a house he didn't own. I went the other direction. I hired a team not to destroy but to expand. We cleared the weeds that had choked Mom's lavender during her illness. We planted new rows, English lavender, French lavender, woolly lavender, rows upon rows of purple resilience. But the biggest change wasn't the garden. It was the house itself. I didn't need 5 bedrooms. I didn't need a formal dining room where nobody ate. I didn't need a man cave in the basement. I needed a space for the children who the world had given up on. I spent a significant portion of the trust fund renovating the entire ground floor. We knocked down the walls that separated the formal living areas to create a massive, open-concept learning space. We replaced the cold marble floors, Dad's pride and joy, with warm, soft cork and bamboo that was safe for little knees to crawl on. We turned the garage, the place where Marcus had stored his leased Porsche, into a sensory gym. We filled it with swing hammocks, tactile walls, and soft lighting for kids with autism who needed a safe space to regulate their emotions. 3 weeks ago, we officially opened the Lavender Learning Center. It is a non-profit specialized preschool for children with developmental delays and sensory processing disorders. It's a place for the difficult kids, the ones other schools turn away, the ones society calls problems, before they've even had a chance to speak. On opening day, the driveway wasn't filled with luxury cars. It was filled with minivans. It was filled with exhausted mothers and worried fathers who looked at our facility like it was an oasis in a desert. I was standing by the door, greeting a little boy named Toby, who was nonverbal and terrified of loud noises. I knelt down, my suit replaced by a soft cardigan and corduroys, and held out that same stuffed bear Marcus had kicked into the mud. I had cleaned him up, stitched his eye back on. Toby touched the bear's fur. He didn't smile, but his shoulders dropped. He took a step inside. That moment, that was worth more than any empire my father ever built. But I know you're wondering about Marcus. You're wondering if the golden child ever found his footing. The crash was spectacular, and it was public. News travels fast in our town, especially bad news. When the bank foreclosed on the Greenwich house, it wasn't a quiet affair. Victoria made sure of that. She filed for divorce 3 days after the will reading, citing irreconcilable differences, which is lawyer speak for the money ran out. She gave an interview to a local lifestyle blog, painting herself as a victim of Marcus's financial deception. She claimed she knew nothing about the fraud, nothing about the debts. I don't know if that's true. I suspect she knew enough to enjoy the lifestyle but not enough to face the consequences. But she washed her hands of him with ruthless efficiency. Marcus didn't go to jail, but it was close. He avoided prison time by pleading guilty to fraud and agreeing to a restitution plan that will garnish his wages for the rest of his life. He lost his real estate license. He lost his reputation. He is permanently blacklisted by every bank and lending institution in the state. Grandma Eleanor told me the rest. She keeps tabs on him, not out of malice, but because she says, someone has to make sure he doesn't starve, even if he is a fool. Marcus lives in a basement apartment in Bridgeport now. It's a rough neighborhood, the kind of place Dad used to sneer at when we drove past on the highway. He works as a night manager at a logistics warehouse. He spends his nights checking inventory lists and managing truck drivers. Ironic, considering he used to think manual labor was beneath him. He drives a 15-year-old sedan with a rusted bumper. I haven't spoken to him since the law office. He hasn't reached out either. I think the shame is too great. Or maybe he's still waiting for me to break, to fail, to prove Dad right. But last week something happened. I was at the local grocery store, buying supplies for the school's snack time. I was in the checkout line, loading crates of apple juice and goldfish crackers onto the belt. I looked up and saw him. Marcus was 2 aisles over. He was wearing a faded polo shirt and tired jeans. He looked older. The arrogance that used to hold his spine straight was gone, replaced by a slump of exhaustion. He was buying a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and a 6-pack of cheap beer. He looked up and locked eyes with me. For a moment, the air in the store stood still. I saw him glance at my cart, full of food for the children I served. I saw him look at my face. Not smug, not angry, just peaceful. I waited for him to sneer. I waited for him to make a comment about me being a glorified babysitter. But he didn't. He just looked at me with a hollow, haunted expression. Then, he looked down at his cheap shoes, turned his cart around, and walked to a different checkout line to avoid passing me. I watched him go. I didn't feel a surge of triumph. I didn't feel the urge to chase him down and wave my bank statement in his face. I just felt a profound sense of pity. He had spent his whole life climbing a ladder that was leaning against the wrong wall. He had chased the wrong definition of success, and it had led him to a lonely checkout line in a grocery store, unable to look his own brother in the eye. Dad had built buildings. Marcus had tried to build wealth. I was building a future. I paid for my groceries and walked out into the sunshine. I had a school to run. Yesterday was Mom's birthday. It has been a year since she passed. To mark the occasion, Grandma Eleanor drove up from the retirement community. She's moving a bit slower these days, but her mind is still as sharp as a diamond cutter. We sat in the garden as the sun went down. The lavender was in full bloom, a sea of purple waving in the gentle breeze. The air smelled sweet and clean, the scent of healing. We drank tea from Mom's favorite china cups, the ones Marcus would have probably sold at an estate sale for $5. She would have loved this, Grandma said, looking at the colorful playground equipment we had installed in the side yard. She always wanted this house to be full of noise. Your father wanted it to be a museum. You made it a home. I just followed the map she left me, I said. Grandma reached into her purse. She pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't the blue one from the will reading. This one was worn, the velvet crushed from years of handling. There is one more thing, she said. Your mother kept this hidden in her knitting bag. She was afraid if Robert saw it, he would sell it or give it to Marcus. She handed me the box. I opened it. Inside sat a vintage Patek Philippe watch. It was gold, with a leather strap that was worn soft with age. The face was simple, elegant, timeless. This belonged to your grandfather, Eleanor said. My husband. He wasn't a rich man, Braden. He was a high school history teacher. He saved for 20 years to buy this watch. He used to say that time is the only currency that really matters, so you should measure it with something beautiful. I ran my thumb over the glass face. Robert demanded this watch when we got married, Grandma continued. He said it was a man's watch and should go to the head of the household. Linda told him it was lost. She lied to him for 30 years to keep this safe. Why? I asked, my voice thick with emotion. Because she was saving it for the man who deserved it, Grandma said. She looked me right in the eye. She left it for the man who knows that being a provider isn't about the size of the check you bring home. It's about the size of the shelter you build for the people you love. She reached out and closed my fingers around the watch. Marcus has a Rolex, she said. Or he did before the pawn shop took it. But this is a legacy. Wear it, Braden. I took off my cheap digital watch, the one with the timer I used for student timeouts, and strapped the gold watch onto my wrist. Felt heavy. Felt like an anchor. Real men build empires, Dad had said. I looked at the watch. I looked at the garden. I looked at the school I had built from the ashes of my family's greed. I realized then that Dad was right, but his definition was wrong. An empire isn't steel and glass. An empire isn't a portfolio of stocks. An empire isn't fear and intimidation. An empire is a classroom where a nonverbal child speaks his first word. An empire is a garden where grief is transformed into growth. An empire is the ability to sleep at night with a clear conscience, knowing you haven't stepped on anyone to get where you are. I am a kindergarten teacher. I sing nursery rhymes. I wipe tears. I teach children that sharing is strength and hitting is weakness. And I am the richest man I know. Not because of the $2 million. That is just a tool, a resource. I am rich because I am free. I am free from the need to impress a ghost. I am free from the cycle of toxicity that destroyed my brother. I stood up and walked to the edge of the porch. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the first stars were appearing. Somewhere out there, I hoped Mom was watching. I hoped she could see the lavender. I hoped she could see the watch on my wrist. I raised my hand in a quiet salute to the night sky. Thank you, I whispered. I'm okay now. We're okay. I turned back to Grandma Eleanor. Want a refill on that tea? Make it chamomile, she smiled. And then read me one of those stories you read the kids. I like the one about the rabbit. The Velveteen Rabbit? I asked. That's the one, she said. The one about becoming real. I smiled. I can do that. I walked back into the house. My house, my school, my home. Ready to tell the story one more time. The story about how love, not money, makes you real. We've reached the end of Braden's journey, but the echoes of his story ring louder than any closing bell. This story wasn't just about inheritance or revenge. It was a masterclass in integrity and self-worth. What is your definition of a real man or a real leader? Is it the person with the biggest bank account or the person who takes care of others? Or If this story resonated with you and you're happy to see justice finally served, simply comment the word good below. Seeing that word tells me that you stand with Braden, you stand for kindness, and you believe that good people deserve good endings. Let's flood the comments with positivity. Thank you for listening, and remember, the most valuable inheritance you can leave is a legacy of love. Stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.